The door should not have existed. Hidden beneath a collapsed stone tomb in the oldest section of Blackthorn Graveyard, it appeared only after part of the ground gave way beneath my feet. When my flashlight beam illuminated the ancient iron handle buried under centuries of soil, a terrible feeling settled inside my chest. I remember standing there in the freezing darkness while rain tapped softly against broken headstones. The graveyard had been abandoned for decades, and local historians insisted every burial record had long since been catalogued. Yet the doorway beneath me clearly led somewhere no one had documented. Something scratched against the other side. The sound lasted only a second before silence returned, but it was enough to make my skin crawl. Every instinct told me to leave immediately. Instead, I pulled the rusted handle and opened the forgotten door. What was waiting beneath that graveyard, and why did history try so hard to erase it? My name is Daniel Mercer, and until that night, I considered myself a rational person. I worked as a freelance photographer, specializing in historical locations and abandoned architecture. Old buildings fascinated me because every cracked wall seemed to hold a story waiting to be discovered. Blackthorn Graveyard sat several miles outside a remote village surrounded by dense forests. The cemetery dated back hundreds of years and carried countless local legends. Most residents avoided the place entirely after sunset. The village caretaker warned me about a particular section hidden behind rows of weathered monuments. He claimed people occasionally heard voices there despite nobody being present. Several visitors had reported seeing lights beneath the ground. I laughed at the stories then. During the afternoon, I photographed crumbling statues and moss-covered graves while gathering information. Everything appeared ordinary until I noticed an old mausoleum partially collapsed into the earth. Strange symbols covered the remaining stones. The symbols appeared repeatedly throughout the cemetery. I found them carved into headstones, etched onto iron fences, and hidden beneath layers of moss. None matched known religious markings from the region. Their repetition suggested they served a specific purpose. That evening, curiosity pulled me back. Heavy clouds covered the moon as I returned, carrying professional equipment and stronger lights. The cemetery felt different after dark. Every shadow seemed deeper than it should have been. When the ground collapsed beside the mausoleum and revealed the hidden entrance, it felt less like an accident and more like an invitation. The ancient iron door groaned loudly as I forced it open. A staircase descended into complete darkness. Cold air rose from below. The temperature dropped so suddenly that my breath became visible. Damp stone walls surrounded the narrow staircase. With each step downward, the sounds of the outside world disappeared. At the bottom, I entered a massive underground chamber. Rows of stone coffins stretched into darkness beyond my flashlight's reach. Dust covered everything except the floor directly ahead. There, fresh footprints led deeper into the vault. Someone had been there recently. The discovery made no sense because the entrance had been buried. Yet the footprints were undeniable. They disappeared around a distant corner where darkness swallowed the passage. As I followed them, faint whispers drifted through the chamber. The voices were too quiet to understand. They seemed to come from multiple directions simultaneously. Every time I turned toward one source, the sound shifted elsewhere. Eventually, I reached a circular room lined with ancient carvings. The walls depicted hooded figures kneeling before a towering shape rising from the earth. Unlike the human figures, the central being possessed an elongated body and countless twisting limbs. Looking at it triggered an overwhelming sense of dread. Near the carvings stood a stone table. Upon its surface rested several journals preserved inside sealed containers. Their pages described a forgotten religious group that existed centuries earlier. The writings repeatedly referenced something called the listener below. Nobody explained what it was. The deeper I explored, the stranger everything became. Hidden chambers contained ritual objects and damaged records, deliberately burned long ago. Entire sections appeared destroyed to conceal information. That night I returned home exhausted. Sleep brought vivid nightmares unlike anything I had experienced before. I dreamed of standing inside the vault while thousands of voices whispered my name. Something enormous moved beneath the stone floor. When I woke, dirt covered my shoes. At first, I assumed I had tracked it indoors earlier. Then I noticed fresh scratches on my bedroom floor. They formed symbols identical to those beneath the graveyard. The following evening I returned. Part of me feared what I might discover. Another part needed answers. Curiosity had transformed into obsession. Inside the vault, I ventured farther than before. The whispers grew louder with every chamber. Occasionally, I glimpsed movement at the edge of my flashlight beam. Whenever I turned, nothing remained. Then I discovered a hidden corridor. The narrow passage led beyond the mapped sections of the burial vault. Ancient candles lined the walls. Shockingly, several had burned recently. At that point, I genuinely didn't know what to do. If you had discovered what I found that night, would you have kept investigating or walked away forever? Let me know what you think before I tell you what happened next. I continued deeper underground. The corridor ended at a massive bronze door covered with thousands of carved names. Some names dated back centuries. Others belonged to people who had died only decades earlier. One name belonged to a missing historian. According to local records, he vanished while researching Blackthorn Graveyard 20 years earlier. Yet his name appeared among countless others on the bronze surface. The realization filled me with unease. Behind the door waited another chamber. Every wall contained names carved so densely that no stone remained visible. Candles illuminated the room, despite no apparent caretaker. Melted wax covered the floor like frozen rivers. A journal rested upon a pedestal. Its final entries revealed horrifying details about the forgotten cult. Members believed an ancient entity slept beneath the graveyard. They served as guardians rather than worshippers. Their purpose was containment. Generations had maintained rituals designed to keep the creature imprisoned below. Whenever the rituals weakened, people disappeared. Their names were added to the chamber walls. The final page ended abruptly. Beneath the journal, a staircase spiraled downward into darkness. A foul smell drifted upward from below. Against all reason, I descended. The lowest chamber stretched farther than my flashlight could illuminate. Ancient pillars surrounded a massive stone pit, sealed by chains thicker than tree trunks. Strange symbols glowed faintly across every surface. The air vibrated with low rhythmic sounds. Then the chains moved. Metal groaned loudly throughout the cavern. Dust rained from the ceiling. Something beneath the pit had awakened. A voice entered my mind. It did not speak through sound. The presence simply appeared inside my thoughts. It knew my name and every fear I had ever hidden. The stone seal cracked. Blackness poured from the widening fracture like liquid smoke. Within it, I glimpsed countless eyes opening simultaneously. Shapes shifted inside the darkness, forming impossible limbs and distorted faces. The entity was alive. Suddenly, I understood the carvings and disappearances. The cult had sacrificed themselves for centuries to maintain the prison. Their destruction allowed the seal to weaken. The thing beneath had been listening all along. Thousands of whispers erupted around me. The carved names across the chamber walls began bleeding dark liquid. Shadows twisted unnaturally across the cavern floor. Then I saw them. Figures emerged from the darkness wearing ancient ceremonial robes. Their faces appeared partially transparent. These were the dead guardians who once protected the prison. They began the ritual again. The spirits formed a circle around the pit while chanting words older than any language I recognized. Brilliant light erupted from the symbols covering the chamber. The entity screamed. The sound shattered stone. Cracks spread through pillars as the battle intensified. The guardians struggled to force the creature back into confinement. For one terrible moment, several enormous eyes fixed directly upon me. It knew me now. One guardian turned toward me and pointed toward the staircase. Whether warning or command, I understood the message immediately. I ran. The vault collapsed behind me. Stone ceilings crashed downward as I raced through collapsing corridors. Dust filled the air and swallowed visibility. The whispers followed me all the way to the surface. I barely escaped. The ground erupted behind me as sections of the graveyard caved inward. By dawn, the hidden entrance had vanished completely. Authorities later blamed natural erosion. Nobody believed my story. Months passed before I attempted discussing what happened. Every listener dismissed it as stress or imagination. Eventually, I stopped trying. Yet the nightmares never ended. I still dream about the underground pit and the eyes staring through endless darkness. Sometimes, I wake hearing whispers inside empty rooms. Occasionally, I find unfamiliar symbols scratched onto nearby surfaces. The worst incident happened last winter. While organizing old photographs from Blackthorn Graveyard, I discovered an image I never remembered taking. It showed the deepest chamber moments before the collapse. Standing beside the pit was a single hooded figure watching me. The figure was not alone. Behind it stood dozens more shapes emerging from darkness. Some resembled the dead guardians. Others looked disturbingly different. When I enlarged the photograph, I noticed something impossible. One of the carved names on the chamber wall had changed. It had not belonged to any missing historian or ancient guardian. It belonged to me. I have never returned to Blackthorn Graveyard. The cemetery remains closed to visitors after a series of unexplained incidents. Several people have vanished near the property over the years. Official investigations never found answers. Sometimes I wonder whether the guardian succeeded. Perhaps the entity remains trapped beneath the earth where it belongs. Perhaps the prison still holds. Or perhaps something escaped before the vault collapsed. Because every few weeks, usually just before dawn, I hear a voice whispering from somewhere beneath my house. And every time it speaks, it sounds a little closer. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to like this video, subscribe to Grave Nova Stories, and share your thoughts in the comments below. I'll see you in the next nightmare.